Hello and welcome to We Are the Deluge, a spoiler-free chapter-by-chapter podcast about the climate change novel The Deluge by Stephen Markley. We are your co-hosts, Emily Crandall and John McMahon, two hack viziers of the Leviathan. Today we are discussing Leviathan, set in 2033, the fourth chapter from Thomas Hobbes, Tony Pietri's point of view, which we are presenting in the form of an academic journal article.
Hey, John, if you were an agent of some undisclosed private contractor
oh my God,
that is
my
working
dreams.
as the arm of a bureaucratic agency,
I can't wait.
What breakfast pastry would you be eating on duty?
There's no free ads, but there's a gluten-free bakery here in Plattsburgh that's relatively new called Without a Trace. And they make like this really delicious like tea cake, coffee cake situation.
Ooh, I love a coffee cake. You know,
what about you, Agent Crandall? That's
a good question. I do. Things in the coffee cake family really appeal to me. I love a bear claw or a cinnamon roll.
Bear claw. I can't. Yeah. Gluten-free bear claw is not quite working, but I would really enjoy that.
If it's like a donut option, I'm like a classic glazed yeasted donut, you know, nothing fancy, but
I miss the donut shop that went up in Crown Heights right before I moved.
Donuts are still good around here. That's for sure. Oh, okay. This I can't wait for this episode that begins with a lot of Hobbes already and breakfast pastries.
What better thing to do than read Hobbes while having a breakfast pastry?
I wish I had one. Shall we jump in with our abstracts to our super formal academic paper in Tony's honor?
Extremely. What's your one sentence summary?
I went with Tony, preoccupied with impending clandestine plans and thoughts of his daughters, is frustrated by another useless encounter with the FBI, only to realize, perhaps too late, how threadbare his rights have become.
Oh, that's very good. I went with a series of life vignettes prefigure not a natural disaster of fire, but an irretrievably bleak legal disaster of Pryra as Tony gets sent to hell.
Ooh. Very good. Wow. Wow.
The final paragraph among so many bleak final paragraphs of so many chapters of the Deluge, and this one is I
had a thought while we were recording last week that I forgot to say out loud, I think. But I'm going to float it now. It would be interesting to create a document that is just every first sentence and last sentence from this novel and see what it says.
I think it'd be great. There might be like secret demonic messages, like when you play Led Zeppelin backwards or something.
Yes.
I don't put it past him.
Oh my God. Which reminds me that I almost read the demonology chapter of Hobbes, but I did not have time.
No spoilers, Emily.
Okay, fine. Okay, do we have any new characters here aside from the agents?
Agent Croissant.
Agent Croissant. And Agent Wallflower, which is her real name.
Oh my God. Patricia Wallflower.
Yeah. That's not her real name, right?
I think Markley thinks it's funny if it's her real name.
Yeah.
And it's good. This is, to get the inevitable reference out of the way that I didn't make, and I suspect you probably didn't make. There's a lot of Kafka in this chapter where obligated as political theorist who, grew up in the post 9/11 era to point that out. Mm-hmm. And there's something about the name being Patricia Wallflower that screamed that, among many other things. It's if it wasn't so terrible, it would be really hilarious. The situation that Tony is in and how he deals with it.
I mean, it is still funny to render rendered by Markley in part, because of the process by which he discovers what's happening to him is really, it's almost slapsticky. That's
the correct word. Especially when he goes out and the office is empty.
Yeah.
It's am I watching Severance? Am I watching Office Space? What's happening here?
So crazy. I really liked this chapter, I think.
Yeah. Lots of plot that maybe we can kind of quickly run through before we get into the intro. The climate concert plan continues apace, and it ends up that Tony has to try to protect that at all costs. Clay Rowe from
we don't know what the plan is, really.
No, absolutely not. Okay. Like, it's just, as you pointed out, like seemingly clandestine, but we have no idea why.
Yeah, there's a concert. Ash and Tony meet in a VR world, which took me a second. I had to reread a couple paragraphs twice because I was like, wait, are they in a world or are they not? Like,
it's the way it's written is, I imagine, purposely like kind of blurry about whether it's real or VR.
So we learned through their conversation that the climate concert is going. Ash is upset that Seth wants to attend the concert. And because we learned that they have a child on the way. So Seth won.
He sure did.
Yeah.
Someone from 6 Degrees, Clay Rowe, has been caught. I think we find that out, right? We did not learn that in the Shane chapter previously.
That was my question for you, which leads me to believe that we did not. Okay. If we're both like, we don't know that yet, right? Then Fair. We don't know that yet.
Fair. Catherine is in an extremely fancy rehab in Florida after having moved there and relapsed, paid for by Uncle Corey, who, against all odds, continues to show up.
That, I'm not going to lie, that rehab sounds really great.
I'm not going to lie, I had the exact same thought.
This book is really forcing us to reckon with some parts of ourselves.
I mean, that's, look, as a cis white man, like, that should be the job of a lot of pop culture, is force me to reckon with myself.
Yeah. Okay, so we also learned Ash has requested this meeting with Tony because he's heard rumors of a list circulating that comes from, I think, Victor Love's administration, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Basically listing anyone who he perceives as a political opponent that has some sort of Islamic background. And Tony jokes with him like, oh, you're Muslim. And Ash very seriously is like, apparently the degree to which I am, a believer doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is a very,
about the liturgy. Yeah.
Yeah, which is like a very Ash way of talking about racism, I guess.
Yes, I think so. We found out from Tony that the Dems are, as he says, quote, play acting concern without doing much of anything. And he makes the comparison several times between Love and Trump, and in some ways thinks Love is worse than Trump. And like, look, like, we're recording this a couple of days after Trump fucking bombed Iran. So like, thinking about all of the unilateral, like, presidential executive actions abroad from across many different presidents of many different parties, or two different parties, like, that hit home a lot. In addition to, as we were texting about, recording this during a giant heat wave in the Northeast. Yeah.
Increasingly, the timelines are collapsing in on each other.
Yes. Which I think there's the line in here that, or a couple of lines in which that happens for Tony as well.
Yeah. I'm going to try to say something about that. In our lit review. We'll see if it works.
I can't wait.
Okay, should we move from our abstract into the intro of our paper?
Yes. So I'll try to keep my hook short. So a couple of things I didn't consider. New York Times story from a couple of days ago about the University of Florida law student as a cultural object for the way it got taken up, like on the left or academic left or something like that. Vis-a-vis like Tony's, maybe some student was trying to prove a point during their scroll and key initiation. There were now young brown shirts of every stripe and political persuasion.
Yeah.
As I said, we're required kind of by our job to do a Kafka reference, but I'm not going to. Then I also thought about Bloodline, the Netflix show, in regards, but solely to like the Tony, Corey, and Kat in Florida.
Interesting.
But
I haven't seen Bloodline.
It's okay. It's not bad, but it's not a bad summer. Like, other things are happening. I'm not going to pay super close attention, as Netflix doesn't want us to do. Okay. But my real object takes off from the first paragraph of this chapter. So let me read that chapter and then we'll go. He met Ash Hassan in the dining car of a 1930s train whizzing through the passes of snow-capped mountains, little Euro gingerbread towns in the distance. No avatars, just two rumpled colleagues shooting the shit, ostensibly about the, quote, sea-level listening tour Hassan was on with his latest congresswoman of choice. Ash, resolute in his devotion to Data, insisted that Tony's time would be better spent joining the government rather than attending the concert less than 9 months away. Okay, so I was trying to think about like, oh, what does this setting communicate to us, and what ridiculous analogy can I make? So I am going to propose that our cultural artifact is the murder on the Orient Express.
Oh my God! Yes.
but like, so I want it to be the book, right? To go most with the vibe of what I think about this cultural artifact. But in terms of like the artificiality of it and like the doing this in virtual reality, maybe like the cursed 2017 film version is actually appropriate. Yes. But spoiler alert for a 90-year-old book, Murder on the Orient Express, right? It turns out that everybody on the train is the killer, right? They all have some connection to the person that is killed, and they all participate in the murder in some form or another. So I would argue that if we think about Murder of the Orient Express and take that premise and impose it upon climate change, that the murder on the Orient Express is a metaphor about how like we can't hold any one single entity or person response for the murder, i.e. climate change, uninhabitable Earth, the murder of all the species, et cetera, but rather everyone who is rich enough to ride the fancy cars in the Orient Express, i.e. your like major corporations, your polluters, your people in power who do nothing but know what's happening, et cetera, that all of them are the proverbial people on the train who murdered the Earth, the non-human nature, non-human animals, et cetera, et cetera.
That is so good.
The funniest part about this is that if we accept my ridiculous metaphor, then that makes Stephen Markley Hercule Poirot.
That's really good. I love that so much.
That's what I got for you.
Also, fun fact, I saw that movie in theaters with friend of the podcast, Amy Schiller.
That's amazing. I had forgotten until I was thinking about this yesterday that Johnny Depp was in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because obviously, like, Kenneth Branagh's Hercule Poirot is the most memorable thing. But no, Johnny Depp, like... Really remarkable how many sex pests the Agatha Christie novels managed, or films from this era picked up, right? Because Armie Hammer is in the Death on the Nile one.
Yeah. Yikes. Which also, I think, speaks to some of the themes in the book too, right? About like how the politics of sex and gender sort of bear on the politics of climate change in some degree.
Okay. Now I want Emily Crandall's Freudian ET read of Agatha Christie.
ASAP. I mean, it's there. Okay, so my cultural artifact was prepared with assistance from a friend of the podcast, Matthew Cullinan.
Thank you, Matt.
who also serves as my resident video game advisor for everything related to the intersections of political theory and video games, which I'm learning is so much.
Beautiful.
So I was reading this book at the local coffee shop, and Matt said to me, Leviathan, is that chapter about Final Fantasy? And I was like, say more, won't you?
I'm very intrigued.
So I just start doing a little deep dive. And Leviathan is a character that both like a character and a power that kind of exists across the different Final Fantasy worlds. And like in the earlier kind of low tech versions is just like something you can summon to sort of wield water. But later becomes like an actual kind of like sea monster. And throughout the different series, the different iterations has like different genders. Like sometimes it's a kind of like male figure. In Final Fantasy VII, it's the first time that it's like a really powerful power that like you don't get to wield until after you defeat like some really high head honcho. And then like it's like a kind of like, it's both like something you win, but also something you exercise.
Would you say that it's something that requires both sword and scepter?
I would say that, indeed. And then later, Leviathan becomes like more of a character, and particularly in a most recent one, it's a woman like serpent. And so you have to like defeat the Leviathan instead of wield Leviathan. But I think once you defeat, you can also wield. So there's like something sword and sceptery there.
Sure.
But I went down a rabbit hole on Final Fantasy VII in particular. So I'm going to propose Final Fantasy VII as a pair to this chapter.
Incredible.
Here's the premise of it. Okay, so Final Fantasy VII takes place on a world referred to in-game as the planet, and retroactively you learn it's Gaia. The planet has a life force that's called the life stream, and it's a flow of spiritual energy that gives life to everything on the planet. So during the game, the Shinra Electric Power Company is basically like this mega corporation that's headquartered in a city called Midgar, and it kind of dominates the world. It's draining the planet's life stream for energy, weakening the planet. So there's different factions in the game.
Okay.
There's the Shinra fighting force is called Soldier in all caps. And basically it's like when the life stream is kind of processed, so when it is run through, right, the system of production, it produces a substance called Mako. And the fighting force Soldier is created by like enhancing humans with this force that is sort of generated from the life force of the planet. There's like a covert branch of Shinra's security forces called the Turks. There are the Cetra, which are a near extinct human tribe, which maintain a strong connection to the planet and to Lifestream. And then there's Avalanche, all caps, which is an eco-terrorist group. And you play as a member of Avalanche. Isn't that crazy?
This is amazing.
Okay. And then so there's also a character that is a fortune-telling robotic cat, which is very relevant to both of our interests.
Very much so.
And there's just like really, it's just an interesting cast of characters. But okay, so Leviathan is something you can summon in this game, but it's a power that doesn't come until far later, and you have to like kill somebody in order to be able to wield it. And it's interesting because it's like, from what I can glean, and again, this is a very rough sketch, so I apologize to any of our listeners who are big Final Fantasy fans who know this better than I do. But it seems to me like life force is something like all the elements, but also the like literal sort of like energy of the earth. So we could think about it in a kind of naturalistic way, or we can think about it in a kind of spiritual way, or we can think about it in a kind of like relational way, right? That like,
did you bury Spinoza and Elizabeth Grosz in your cultural artifact?
Yes, I did. And so, but the Leviathan power is like about water specifically, it seems like to me. So it's kind of interesting to think about like wielding the power of one element as a way, or interrogating the power of one element as a way of thinking through the kind of like ecology of like life itself, right? So in this chapter, we get this really little insight into like how Florida is dealing with or not dealing with sea level rise, right? We hear, do you remember what the terms are?
Amphibious housing.
Yeah, amphibious housing.
You can raise the foundation.
Yeah. Sea level resistant architecture, right? Is the new thing that's going to make money. And then, but like the heat is really the climatological backdrop for this chapter in both like affect and literally, and much like El Demonio, right? So like Tony's chapters are like hot, hot, hot. Like Tony's an old, sweaty man, right? Yep. He's just like sweating,
amen, brother,
and scared, and like that's his role at this point. So I thought it was an interesting way to think about like the elements as having kind of distinct powers, but is also part of, in some way, of the life force. And then the kicker is, so this comes from an article that a fan of the game wrote. And apparently it came out in 1997 too, which is very interesting. And apparently it sort of like inspired a generation of gamers to become like environmentally conscious in some way. But the end scene is what I want to draw our attention to.
Please.
So there's a final cut scene that's set like hundreds of years after the events of the end game. So like you end the game and then you get this like final scene, right? And the scene is this like party member or space coyote guy and his children are roaming the weedy ruins of the world's forgotten, unpopulated metropolis of Midgar. So like everyone's dead in the game, but these like entities that are species that live for thousands of years are still alive and they're roaming. And this is I'm quoting now from this article. As nature reclaims the land and the coyotes frolic, not a single sign of human life is seen. It appears that mankind and all traces of its civilization had perished from the earth due to the action that kind of ends the game. So the way that the game is over, right? Like you play the eco-terrorist and you have to do something in order to save the planet that destroys humanity. And when you win, the planet is saved, but there are no humans left.
Whew. So Mark Lee played Final Fantasy VII, and that was the inspiration for 6 Degrees?
I don't know, maybe. But also I'm like, interesting that there is this other association with Leviathan. I mean, it's not like unrelated, right? I mean, Leviathan, Behemoth are figures that kind of appear in sort of like religious connotations and mythologies, right? And they have different kind of like characteristics in different contexts, and like sometimes they are anthropomorphized, right? Yes. And sometimes they are like, I don't know, in Hobbes's case,
artificial persons.
Yeah, artificial persons. So I think it's interesting to think that like Leviathan has multiple layers for Mark Lee, and that one of them is just like he played the video game and he liked it.
Add it to the list of questions, like yes or no questions, or how much Hobbes have you read? How much Final Fantasy have you played?
Yeah, isn't that interesting that that's the premise of the game?
Yes, it's the like. I suspect, and I've kind of in my adult life like held myself away from getting too much into video games because I think I would get brain wrapped up and time wrapped up way more than I can or should.
Yeah, the mechanics of gameplay on like a console, I just never clicked with because I never had one. But I'm super interested in the storytelling dimension. I don't think ones that are like solving puzzles. I don't know that my brain would do that in that way, but watching people play them is becoming interesting to me.
What's your Twitch handle?
Not that interesting. I haven't committed fully. Yeah. I mean, and I'm also wondering, like, that question is not explicitly sort of floated to the surface in the book yet, but I think it's like underneath a lot of the questions the book is asking.
You mean the question about humans' future place on this planet?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like, and I think for Tony, this is the limits of like his role as a scientist, right? Because he feels comfortable saying, and we get a return of his like panic attack with the methane clathrates or whatever, right? He feels comfortable saying with certainty that like conditions to sustain life as we know it are no longer are like going away fast, and they're going to leave us in ways we don't understand. But beyond that, his science can't tell him what comes after that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's this moment when he like has his vision of the methane clathrates in this chapter where it's like he's a failed version of Neo in the Matrix. It's where like him seeing the methane clathrates, like is Neo seeing the Matrix for no longer the first time, right? Mm-hmm. But like there's this limit that you've precisely identified to Tony and his existence and his sense of the world. And like he was a action hero in the last chapter, so there's also a little bit. So the Matrix is also floating around in, as it is in so much political theory, is floating around in this chapter too.
I was really tempted to pick an in-book artifact and do Minority Report. Last time I taught political theory since 1900, I watched it with my class.
Ooh.
And it was really good. I think, I don't remember what I paired it with, but also I'm like, have we done Marcuse yet on this podcast? We have not, have we?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Anyway.
Maybe that's a Matt challenge. Matt would read Marcuse.
Yeah, right?
Whether he would get it all the way, different story.
Right, as always.
There are some great cultural references in the chapter, too. Tony's joke that, like, the people they would wheel out would be Eddie Vedder and Tom Morello is pitch perfect.
Yeah, so
and I say
funny.
That is both, like, a Pearl Jam and a Rage Against the Machine fan.
Yeah,
because
good.
Both of those people will show up for anything like that. And like, that's good, but also bad. We get a Star Trek shout out, of course. We get more contemporary to the 2010s music references. Lizzo.
Yeah.
Don't think Tony either doesn't know she was quasi-canceled or likes her more because of it.
Yeah.
And then Selena Gomez, whose music Tony kind of likes.
Yeah. Nostalgically, if nothing else.
Teen porridge, right? That's his phrase for...
Or teen girl porridge, I think.
Teen girl porridge,
or girl porridge, yeah. I know that girl was in it, and that really made me happy.
Girl porridge, the next evolution of girl dinner. Yeah.
I love it. Shall we move on to our lit review?
It's time for some Hobbes.
Time for some Hobbes. Okay. Should we explain our conceit or just sort of like do it?
Well, you give Emily Crandall and I a chapter that's called Leviathan, and that is about the state and its power and security apparatuses, and you're buckled yourself in for a couple hours worth of Hobbes.
So true. Okay, so we've decided that we're going to start with a banger. Yeah. That's a classic Hobbes passage. Think about it in relationship to the chapter, and then we're both going to pull on some arguably more obscure and or tenuous threads in Hobbes to think about ultimately why this chapter that is, well, should we give the spoiler yet?
What spoiler? Of the spoiler to Hobbes?
Well, to the chapter, to Tony.
It's a spoiler-free chapter by chapter podcast. So I think we can do it.
Yeah. Okay. So the end of this chapter is Tony realizing he's about to go to prison for something he didn't do.
Yes. The temporality of that we'll talk about later. Yeah. But yes.
But like without trial.
Without charges, no writ of habeas.
He's about to be disappeared by this security apparatus.
Exactly.
So why does a chapter that ends with that revelation, again, temporally kind of vexed, why is it titled Leviathan is maybe the question we can work up to.
Yeah. And I think probably our goal here is to both do the popular imagination, such as it is, of Hobbes, and then, as you said, both do something more obscure and tenuous. So do you want to read the passage of the popular imagination of Hobbes, or should I?
Yeah, I'll read it.
Go for it.
Should we read? Which part should we read?
Let's do the whole paragraph.
The incommodities of such a war?
Absolutely.
Okay. If you are reading along in the Penguin Classics version of Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, this is on page 186.
We're in chapter 13. Great title. Hobbes loves a good title. Of the natural condition of mankind as concerning their felicity and misery.
Okay. Whatsoever, therefore, is consequent to a time of war, where every man is an enemy to every man, the same is consequent to the time wherein men live without other security than what with their own strength and their own invention shall furnish them withal. In such condition, there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain, and consequently no culture of the earth, no navigation, nor use of the commodities that may be imported by sea, no commodious building, no instruments of moving and removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, no arts, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short.
Yeah.
It's hard to read Hobbes out loud.
It's really, wait till we get to the passage that I'm going to take off from. Dear. It's going to be a mess, and everyone will love it.
Did you have to rehearse it in advance?
I haven't rehearsed it. We're going to do it live.
Yes. Okay, so this phrase, obviously, life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, like the Hobbes banger, I think.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
But I feel like, tell me if you think this is true, you've noticed this. I feel like people mix up the order and often will like leave one or two out, which is very funny.
Yes, I believe I did so when we were preparing to record.
Well, but I feel like nasty, brutish, and short are the three that get played all the time.
You want to know who I blame for that?
Who?
International relations scholars.
Ooh.
And the way they read Hobbes. Yeah.
Yes. But solitary and poor is, I think, really important.
Yes.
For Hobbes, but also for the Deluge.
Why for the Deluge?
I don't know. I mean, I think a glib reading is that like class is obviously very central to the analysis that Markley is either offering us or asking us to engage in both climate change itself, but also in the politics of climate change more broadly.
Yeah. I think with this passage, in that particular reading of this passage, there's a question to ask about So Hobbes describes this as, right, the natural state of man, the state of nature, the human in the state of nature, et cetera, et cetera. And side note, like, my read has always been, and if you really want to know this, at me for my dissertation, but that there's a lot less individualism in at least this part of Hobbes than we often think. And that, like, the fear, the continual fear, right, the danger, all these kinds of things are much more atmospheric or relational than they are, like, individualistic. And he may not be as commenting on human nature as such as he gets commonly understood, and even by some political theorists is understood. So just to kind of put that out there. But there's something about this passage, and this is a little bit prefiguring what I'm going to do with my obscure and tenuous passage later on, is that what Markley is doing with this Leviathan chapter is raising a question vis-a-vis Hobbes of what happens when, even when you have a sovereign, some of the things you are without in the state of nature, according to Hobbes, you are without as a result of the sovereign. And, like, I think if we wanted to, like, we could go through each of these lists and be like, here's how the Victor Love administration and or like capitalism and or neoliberalism and or
our own moment
exactly lacks all of these things, or all of these things are precluded. So that's kind of, I think, one reading of this passage that is a little outside the box.
Think about the caveats, right? There's no place for industry because the fruit thereof is certain, right? So it's like a specific kind of naming of the mechanism by which sort of industry is preempted, right?
And consequently, no culture, which is, a fascinating framing by Hobbes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think your read is interesting too. I was just glancing through the C.B. Macpherson intro yesterday, and Macpherson reads Hobbes as, like, kind of glaringly missing an account of kind of class solidarity, or what we might think of as class solidarity. But I think here there's an almost kind of collective like valence to the analysis of, like, the variables that come together to constitute this state of war. So it doesn't seem inevitable, actually. It seems like contextually specific in a way.
I think that's at least a more interesting read of Hobbes, if not necessarily a more or less correct read of Hobbes. Think about it as a more conditional or, like, conjunctive sort of scenario that he's thinking about.
Yeah. So do you think Markley is positing that, like, in the world of the Deluge, it is a world, we're supposed to think of it as the world under the sovereign, or we're supposed to think of it as actually in the state of nature?
So that's both and that one, for sure. Because there's something about the imaginary apocalyptic notion of climate change and global warming and what that will eventually lead to with regards to humans that almost posits a, like, sort of, well, it's a return to the state of nature, right? That it is there will be no more industry and instruments of moving and knowledge and time and arts and letters and society. So there's this question of, that I think is, if not necessarily an academic question, but like a kind of popular doomism conception of climate change that is a return to the state of nature.
Right. So the question is, when is the moment of return?
Yes.
And, like, does the moment that sends us to the return actually put us in the return, or are we in some liminal space between, right, like, civilization and the state of nature, but moving backwards or something?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I think that's exactly right. And thus, in a time of climate Leviathan, both as a result of the sovereign and as a result of the contextual environment, you are kind of in the state of nature, at least under climate Leviathan.
Right. Interesting. Are there other reads of this passage that are sort of, like, pressing on themes of the book?
I think if you handed Ash a bunch of Hobbes, I think you would have to give him, is it Gene Hampton, the, like, the theorist who, like, reads Hobbes as kind of, like, formulating proto game theory or something. I think that'd be the direction that Ash would take it, and I wonder what lessons Ash would draw as a result.
Yeah, but I find that, like, tension in Hobbes really interesting because on the one hand, he spends so much time talking about the relationship between like reason and passions or reasons and appetite and like
all universe is body. Yeah.
And it's not a foregone.
The first like 7 or 8 chapters of Leviathan are about like passions, bodily movements, emotions, language, like all of those kinds of things.
And it's not a foregone conclusion that individuals will consult reason or develop reason or act reasonably.
Yes, precisely.
So like and I think he's really interested in like systems of knowledge. And so like
extremely,
what is the relationship between the actually uncertainty of reason and like what is required for us as a basic kind of threshold of what we will concede or agree to move from a situation that is precarious, dangerous, and violent into one that is ordered and secure and safe. And like freedom is nowhere in either, really. In either scheme.
Right. Because for him, it's like simply about like the ability to move without impediment, right? He goes for kind of the most nominal understanding of something like freedom. Well, I forget if that's freedom or liberty that he calls that, but
yeah. Should we pull out some more obscure threads and then maybe work up to this question of like the title?
Sure. Absolutely. Am I going first here?
I think you should go first.
Okay.
I still have some options.
Okay. I'm going to part 4 of Leviathan, which no one ever reads, although Emily might be one of the few people who has read part 4, even among political theorists.
So funny.
Part 4.
It's been a long time.
Me too. I had to go back to some dissertation notes yesterday, which I really don't want to do ever. But I'm in part 4 of Leviathan, part 4 called Of the Kingdom of Darkness. Incredible. And I'm in chapter 47 of the benefit that proceedeth from such darkness and to whom it accrueth.
Oh my God. I can't believe I was like, should we do demonology?
Paragraph.
I can.
Paragraph 21 of chapter 47. This is going to be a longish quote, but it's so good I have to read the whole thing.
Okay. Wait, where are we?
Paragraph 21.
Kingdom of Darkness, chapter 47, you said?
Yes. I can give you an actual like section header. Comparison of the papacy with the kingdom of fairies.
Oh my God.
That's where we are.
Stop. This is my favorite thing that's ever happened.
Okay. Quote. For from the time that the Bishop of Rome had gotten to be acknowledged for Bishop Universal by pretense of succession to St. Peter, their whole hierarchy or kingdom of darkness may be compared not unfitly to the kingdom of fairies, that is, to the old wives' fables in England concerning ghosts and spirits and the feats they play in the night. And if a man consider the original of this great ecclesiastical dominion, he will easily perceive that the papacy is no other than the ghost of the deceased Roman Empire sitting crowned upon the grave thereof. For so did the papacy start up on a sudden out of the ruins of that heathen power, the language also which they use, both in the churches and in their public acts, being Latin, which is not commonly used by any nation now in the world. What is it but the ghost of the old Roman language? And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. The ecclesiastics are spiritual men and ghostly fathers. The fairies are spirits and ghosts. Fairies and ghosts inhabit darkness, solitude, and graves. The ecclesiastics walk in obscurity of doctrine in monasteries, churches, and churchyards. The ecclesiastics have their cathedral churches, which in what town soever they be erected by virtue of holy water, and certain charms called exorcisms have the power to make those towns cities, that is to say, seats of empire. The fairies also have their enchanted castles and certain gigantic ghosts that domineer over the regions round about them.
Amazing.
Apologies for the long quote, but I had to do it.
Okay. So good.
So I want to read Hobbes against himself, classic political theory move, to argue that his criticism of the Catholic Church here carries over to a criticism of a Leviathan as embodied by the security state depicted in this chapter. You ready?
I'm here for this. I'm so giddy right now.
Okay. Victor Love / a president is the Bishop of Rome, acknowledged as sovereign universal by pretense of succession to the real but also imagined community of the nation.
Wow.
The executive creates a kingdom of fairies, i.e. the direct agents of the state, FBI, DHS, ICE, etc., but also in the indirect agents of the state, like GBI in this chapter, like Zuritas, et cetera, such that Victor Love is the ruler of the kingdom of fairies, where their power is real, but their origin is mysterious and violent and problematic. Or, if you will, right, the kingdom of fairies are the very real, violent, arbitrary power exercised by fucking ICE agents walking around in plain clothes without identification.
Yeah.
So the ghosts and the spirits are like the AI algorithms or predictive analytics that are used to ensnare Tony and countless scores and scores and scores of others, right? They're like the ghosts in the machine that are not human, but act in powerful ways on humans. Victor Love is his presidency is the ghost of the deceased U.S. imperial presidents past, the apotheosis of ruling over graves that were, and then forging some society from the ruins of heathen powers. And there we might think about the genocide and slavery that the U.S. is founded upon. The language of Pryra is written in archaic legalese that no one uses, right? It's the ghost of English common law turned statute obscuring real power. The ecclesiastics are Victor Love's cabinet, like A.G. Greenstreet, spiritual in their belief in the security state, but also the ghostly fathers of the security state, walking within the obscurity of the Pryra doctrine and the constitutional jurisprudence that enables it. The fairies are spirits and ghosts. Fairies and ghosts inhabits darkness, solitude, and graves. That seems extremely self-explanatory. The cathedral churches are kind of an inverse of in the security state. They're not grand, but are benign and commonplace, dotting the landscape of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and everywhere else. I didn't have anything for holy water or charms. But then the enchanted castle is the White House, and the gigantic ghosts are the statues of the long dead founding fathers.
Ooh, holy. Okay. Or we can read Final Fantasy Leviathan.
Please. Yep. Final Fantasy Leviathan's the holy water, and the charms called exorcisms are, executive orders or something.
Or the IPA.
Yes.
I mean, I think maybe the IPA takes on multiple roles or functions kind of in the scheme, the Hobbes scheme.
Absolutely. So that's what I got. And ultimately, Thomas Hobbes, he's aware of the power of the Catholic Church, witnessed the dozens and dozens of pages tearing it to shreds, but he also thinks it's kind of ridiculous and absurd. And had he used the same kind of cutting and fanciful critiques of his own Leviathan, he might have ended up with a different answer. But Mark Lee's depiction of the Leviathan qua U.S. security state in this chapter does the reading that Hobbes never gave us directly.
Wow, that's really good. So one of the things I was going to suggest is that we look at the chapter where he talks about the things that threaten the strength of the Commonwealth. And it strikes me as some of the, a way to read some of that is about things that are maybe endemic to a sort of political order more broadly.
Yes.
And that are somewhat inevitable. And so this hypothetical kind of impervious to weakness or dissolution proposal, that Hobbes is sketching for us, he already knows is not achievable. But I think the question is for us, about the relationship of a democratic sovereign to Hobbes' sovereign. And I think there's a question about, which we've sort of danced around, whether democracies are kind of always weak.
Hobbes certainly thinks so. I mean, even so one of the other ideas I was throwing around was a chapter or two earlier in this, which is about all the ways that the doctrines of the kingdom of darkness lead to undercutting the sovereign. So I think yes. And
I think maybe even for Mark Lee, I think we're getting a pretty bleak, obviously democracy in the US, in our world, and democracy in the US of the world of the Deluge is not ideal type democracy, obviously. But there is this sort of it always comes up against the limits of its own institutional structure. And in part, the democratic levers are the things that render democracy weak.
Stephen Markley, how much Carl Schmitt have you read?
Yeah, exactly.
How much Star Wars prequel did you watch? And he is the correct age to have watched a shit ton of it.
John, that blew my mind. I can't even, I don't know how I'm going to go about my day.
I spent so much time on a Sunday afternoon trying to like make my fucking comparisons between every line of that quote and the US / Victor Love.
Wow. What I have prepared is like very lackluster in comparison, but
I doubt that.
But I think maybe complementary in some way. I wanted to think about Hobbes on like the nature of both like reality and knowledge in Leviathan, and then like Tony as kind of mediating on this or meditating on the same questions.
I love this idea.
And thinking about specifically the function of the IPA, right? Which Tony makes a joke about.
Yeah.
That he doesn't drink that kind of beer. But the IPA, do you remember what it's called?
I don't.
Oh, it's the identity prediction analysis. So this is that AI system we've run into in a bunch of different chapters, right? We know from Shane and Quinn, right, that the Quinn's been like feeding false information. We also learn in this chapter that the same is true of the group that had previously had their clandestine meeting in another VR world.
Yes.
They're foiling the identity analysis in the same way, right? Feeding it misinformation. But
like
it also
Tony pretended to just be looking at VR porn when he's been having his clandestine meetings. Yes.
Right. But it also accurately targeted him in his real day-to-day life as what it perceives as a threat. So kind of making sense of those layers of like information, disinformation, perception, and then Tony's kind of like increasing sense that like he doesn't know what's real anymore. So I wanted to think about Hobbes on what he calls the causes of absurdity.
I almost picked something from this part.
Of course. In chapter 9 of the first part of Man, of the several subjects of knowledge. So I wanted us to look at the list that he offers in Causes of Absurdity.
Beautiful.
And think about, this is also, of course, appropriately draws on some of the phantasms and spirits and things too.
Sure does.
I wanted us to like look at the list and then think about this thing that he's flagging as like this mistaking of bodies and accidents. And we could even think about that in relationship to Hobbes's sort of debate with Boyle, right, on the steam pump and on experiments, and like, how do we really know what we know? Our classic epistemology question. So Hobbes makes a list here of 7 things that are what he calls the causes of absurdity. So first of all, like we could think about, what does he mean by absurdity? Just like a wrong fact or something else, right? And I think thinking about the argument you just made of reading Hobbes as both like a critic of the Catholic Church, but also as thinking of it as kind of silly, is maybe there's a clue there to what absurdity means. So the first cause is, Hobbes says, I ascribe to want of method. They begin not their ratiocination from definition, settled signification of their words, as if they could cast account without knowing the value of 1, 2, 3. So like, there's just no plan, right? There's no
premises, no plans.
Yeah, no plans.
No solid premises.
And the second one I think is really interesting, and I want us to think about what it means, because I think it is the premise, if you will, for the assertions that follow. So the second cause of absurd assertions, I ascribe to the giving of names of bodies to accidents, or of accidents to bodies, as they do that say faith is infused or inspired when nothing can be powered or breathed into anything but body, and that extension is body, and that phantasms are spirits, etc. Okay.
That etc. is doing a lot of work, my guy.
A lot of work. And also, I sat with this for a long time, and I was like, okay, so this is a criticism of a particular religious sensibility, but also of an epistemological error.
Yes.
So is he arguing that like Christianity is fundamentally mistaken on the grounds of knowledge?
I mean, this was a huge debate in Hobbes' interpretation, right? Because like ultimately one of the things he's attempting to do in Leviathan, right, is to establish a thoroughly materialist, in the sense of body, like justification for the state, but also for some notion of Christianity,
right,
while rejecting the ones that are full of accidents, like the Catholic Church.
But I think what's interesting here is that it's like, if we say bodies are like facts and accidents are beliefs, which I don't think is necessarily right, but just like for hypothetically kind of teasing it out, right? Then like a problem is that people proceed from a belief.
Yes.
And from there generate knowledge based on the premise of based on an accident rather than based on something that as it exists, right? And this is what I take kind of like his critique of Boyle to have been, is that like experiments are producing something that is not as it is. And so when we observe it, we are observing something we're not observing its true nature. We're observing something we have affected, which is maybe like a very contemporary read on what Hobbes is doing. But I think like that Boyle's like technology, right? Like what's the way that Simon and Schaefer frame it? That technology functions as an objectifying resource, right? So technology is the thing that renders it objective. And so we can generate principles based on our observations that we've produced through the use of this technology. And Hobbes like is outrightly rejecting that, I think, right? And so like, and I think this is an interesting way to think about the tensions over the identity prediction analysis stuff, right? So like Tony's freaking out because he thinks they've figured out the climate concert, whatever that means.
Whatever
right?
that means.
And then he has this moment where he's like, oh, they don't know, he says. So this is like a bottom of 474. Yeah. This isn't a joke. You're linked directly to a terrorist group that's killed 2 people. And then she says, what about the concert for the climate? And then he says, they don't know. And then, right, there's this Clay Rose, the first operational actor. And then he keeps like raising the question of the Constitution, right? Over and over again. Like, I get a lawyer. And they're like,
faith
you don't.
in accidents.
Yeah. And like, it doesn't work like that anymore, right? There's no writ of habeas under Prura. And then he like is sitting there and he's sort of thinking about, you know, he has to pee, like all these really like visceral kind of bodily reactions to it. And then he realizes that like he's not getting out of there and that it worked, right? He's like in some way safe from the thing that is really what's going on, but he's also under this kind of like false pretense going to be held responsible for something he didn't do.
Yep.
Which is like, I did not do the legwork of tracing like every body and accident kind of and those like cross-wired kind of mistakes maybe on Hobbes's term, but it strikes me as like really actually difficult to parse, right? Like he has done something, we don't know what, he knows what. Agent Croissant and Agent Wallflower don't know what he has done or what he's doing, but they mistakenly but correctly, right?
Yeah, this is the Kafka of it, right?
Yeah, like through the use of this prediction technology that predicts, like experimentally produces predictions based on some things that have happened, but also some things that have not happened.
And thus is itself its own objectifying tool.
Right. Which is also somewhat paradoxically Tony's science.
Oh, right. Because he's running Monte Carlo simulations and it's all about doing predictive analytics based on changing inputs and conditions. Yeah.
And that's how Ash got rich. It's how he started his career in politics. Yeah. So I don't know. I think like Hobbes's kind of critique of the objectifying function of technology is maybe actually quite salient here and helps to like either clarify or make messier this like chain of nobody knows what's real, but everybody's acting on information that is like verifiable in some way. And
produces
true
a reality and truth of some sorts.
Yeah. That's my proposal.
Don't sell your own Hobbesing short, right? Your takes on our friend Tommy are also arguably get us much further into the Deluge than my fanciful ghosts and fairies did.
No, I love the ghosts and fairies so much. I'm so pleased.
All right. Lit review. We completed it. We did it. I would just like to say that I sent a joke text to Emily yesterday. It says minute 47, time to be done with the lit review and move on. And we're at recording time, minute 58.
Oopsies.
If you're listening,
Thank you.
You're here for it. You like it.
Okay. I will say though, I think this is our most theory version of a Tony paper because I would argue, have interwoven the lit review with the methods and findings.
Yes.
So we've made Tony a theorist in this one instance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything that we need to talk about thematically or kind of functionally in the novel that we haven't got at yet?
I think functionally just maybe a tiny bit of filling out some of the details on the security state that happens. And I think it's how benign and innocuous the process by which Tony's vanishing, disappearance, incarceration plays out.
Yeah.
That like it's a seemingly innocuous, seemingly quote unquote helpful visit from to unidentified agency DHS, which is what they first say, agents. We only find out later that there's some private contractor, right, that's supposed to maybe be helping Tony, and he's going to answer a few questions and then be on his way to the city to go see his daughter. That it's just a boring bureaucratic office in an office park, right? There's normal office sounds. He walks around to the copier room, and the dawning, as you said, of Tony's realization of what's happening is, I think, like little bit of a metaphor for how one can find themselves like deep into a heavily securitized state without necessarily having realized each of the steps along the way.
Yeah.
And there's something that like, then he gets to the end and he eventually realizes, right, that like Prira made this all legal. The identity precision and predictive analysis gets Tony here, led to like a FISA warrant to surveil all his communication, which found text messages with Nico and a picture of him and Clay Rowe together like 15 years ago or something like that, which then leads to him being labeled an enemy combatant under Section 1034 of Prira, meaning he has no right of habeas and no right to a lawyer. And the entire time, Tony is like asking the questions that like anyone who has thought about this is like ready to ask. Like, I'm not going to talk to anybody. I want a lawyer. Am I under arrest? Am I free to go? And he never gets a direct answer to any of those questions. Yeah. I think that that's one of the kind of particularly telling and particularly chilling dimensions of this, like throughout the course of this chapter.
Yeah. And and the way that they evade the questions or the way that they dismiss his claim that he has rights is just like really, I mean, it's banal, right? They're like, it doesn't work like that anymore.
Yeah.
There's no guns. He's not getting beat, right? No. They're just like, you don't have that right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. It's chilling.
And the way that Tony narrates it is the Tony narrates it and then the book narrates it. And here's where we get to some of the kind of structure temporality questions, maybe is fascinating. So I was thinking particularly about this line at the bottom of 476. A feeling had risen as though these two had packed him into a suitcase and were smuggling him across the border of reality itself, which is one of the like Kafka, but also Alice in Wonderland, like sort of references that one finds himself in and talking about like the U.S. detention apparatus.
And also we have another reference to breaking a protocol, right? Yeah. In that same paragraph, which was like the whole thing in the last Shane chapter, but also
in an emergency smash protocol. Yeah. And when you're declaring the state of emergency, that's
and like the stakes of smashing protocol from the perspective of the state versus the perspective of the clandestine low-tech eco-terrorist organization. Low-tech, but actually high-tech.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Everything is not as it seems.
I have a question for you about Tony in this chapter that I couldn't answer while I was reading and thinking about it this particular time around. To what extent do you think Tony's experience is an action hero in the fire rescue movie El Demonio changed his character and the way he reacted to this particular situation?
I mean, he reacts in this situation kind of bumbly, I think.
Yeah.
He's like insecure and uncertain. Like even in his recounting of himself as a father, right? He like cries when he's saying goodbye to Catherine or like just chatting with her about how she's doing. He's like, I'm going to get to Holly. But like there's definitely no, right? He's not like how do I get out of this building? Can I break this window? How do I propel down the edge and like escape? Right. He like picks up a phone, right? And we probably put something into motion, but we don't know.
Correct.
Yeah.
Cryptic foreshadowing.
So like, is he not on alert because he's like, he got the outcome that he wanted in this other super high pressure situation, so he doesn't think the stakes are high anymore? Or
that's a great way to frame it, because I hadn't even considered that possibility. Like, I was thinking, to what extent is it a kind of continuity, like his same fuck you attitude or self-destructive streak, which led to him getting canceled in Davos, comes through again. At first it fucks him over, but then ends up kind of saving him because it works to keep them off the scent of the concert. So that's like a continuity piece. And the specific question I was thinking about, though, is without the experience of becoming an action hero in El Demonio and also like playing God, which he even references like in, about this life that he feels very much tied to, someone who's now died, right? The firefighter who saved him and Catherine and the other guy and the dog.
And he laughs, right? Like he sent money to the family, but like, how does that even compare, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so like the particular moments were when he has the recognition that he needs to get angry as a show towards the DHS agents to like play back at them, despite the consequences to himself. Like, I'm wondering, does he make that same decision or make that same decision consciously without the El Demonio experience?
Right.
And then like the much smaller version of that is to what extent is the pissing in the plant a continuity of his self-destructive fuck you, or like a show of power or agency on some level?
Yeah. That's so funny, because I didn't read him as actually exercising a ton of agency in this chapter. Because like, even when he's like, oh, I need to get angry, like that is just his default.
True.
And the realization is like, he suddenly understood a little bit how the thing that has been explained to him probably numerous times that he never quite grasped. Now he's like, oh, I get how it works.
Yeah.
And like, that's kind of like a embarrassing moment a little bit, right? Like no one's there to witness it, but like, he's like, oh shit. Like, now I suddenly understand the function of this anonymizing thing. Right. And now that I've understood that, the only thing I can do here to like save whatever it is I'm saving is act how it expects me to act. Right. Which is like arguably not that heroic to act as you're expected. Right. In a way.
It's really good because it becomes a question of, do we judge it or view it or experience it differently because at some point some intentionality and agency enters the picture, when he would have acted more or less the same way regardless.
Right. It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I thought he was kind of like, it was like a very different portrayal of him it was more akin to like him as a father in some of the earlier chapters to me, where he's just sort of like trying desperately to get by and not fuck things up, I think like El Demonio to me seemed like an aberration from his, but you're right in keeping with his general, like, I don't give a shit what people think about me, but that doesn't extend to typically how he acts as a father, right? Yes. He cares deeply about how, especially what he says affect his kids. And he's always kind of at a loss to do better.
Yeah.
And then in El Demonio, he's just like pure instinct, right? But also there's a bit of it that's, as you said, rightly point to, like self-destructive, right? So it's about her, but it's also about him. So it's always kind of about him.
Yes.
To some degree, even when it's genuinely motivated out of a place of love and concern for his daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you're right to turn us to the way he's thinking about his daughters, because parenthood is such a central motif, if I may say, throughout this chapter.
Yeah, that was one of my lists.
As he tells Ash, like, he's about to experience the hell and joy of being a parent, for instance, that rearranges your priorities. And it also helps us think about my other question for you, which is what you think Markley is doing structurally with these couple like almost vignettes. And like you commented even to me, I first was over text or before we started, the like strange opening to this chapter, and the way like you're just kind of dropped into a like bunch of mini episodes before we get to the eventual thing of the chapter. And it's like, what do you think is up with this chapter structurally, either in Tony's story or in the novel?
I don't think we've ever arrived to a scene already in a VR world that is not at the outset marked as such. I think this is the first time that's happened.
So it's like as VR increasingly dominates people's life, so too it dominates
the novel. Yeah. Like usually we're like led into the world and then here we're dropped in it. And it took me a moment, like we were saying earlier, to like actually realize that that's what it was. And then Tony, right, he has that thing when he leaves the world. Did we read that already?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, he says, this is on 465. After their palaver, Tony removed his VR goggles and he was back in a dank motel room. The headsets were getting small. This new one he'd just bought reminded him of Geordie LaForge glasses from The Next Generation. It was uncanny how for a tingling 20 seconds or so, his motel room felt less real than the train crossing the Pyrenees.
Yeah. And he's so concerned in narrating the seeming physicality of the VR world too, right? It's the snow-capped mountains, it's the gingerbread cutout Euro towns,
and the only thing that lifts you
salad.
Is the fake food.
And then that's the like overly glistening dressing on the arugula,
and he can't lift up the champagne glass, right? Like that. I think that moment was where I went back and I was like, oh shit, we're in a world. Like I did not realize that right away. So I think that sentence, uncanny how for a tingling 20 seconds or so his motel room felt less real than the train crossing the Pyrenees. I think my sense is the tension that's being built in this chapter is we as readers are increasingly less sure about what's real. In the novel.
Yeah, I like that. But and then Marley hides the ball a little bit, so to speak, because he then goes to the very real, concrete, embodied, like in time with Kat, right? With details about the weather, how much Tony hates Florida. There's like a very important hug where Kat notices he's crying. Isn't even narrated to us as the reader, but it's like so real that the characters comment on it as if spontaneously. And there's like this concern about how much detail does Kat have for the next steps in her life, and what is Corey's role in that, and where is it going to be? So it's a very real vignette of a couple of pages. It ends up being like 2 pages almost exactly before he then is on the road to disappeared.
And then, which also interesting that we've twice now talked about Say Nothing.
Let's do it again.
The politics of disappearing, right? And like a non-state organization that has aspirations to dramatically reconfigure the landscape of sovereignty, right? So like, I guess like future sovereign hopeful, right? To some degree, right?
For sure.
I don't know if that's a good way to characterize like a revolutionary organization, but I think it works for a Hobbes chapter.
Question. Sure is. And we should probably then maybe we close here in our methods and findings is talk about the method at the very end of the chapter. So the final paragraph on 478. He tried not to watch the time, but he couldn't help it. He was starving and needed to pee again. He sat in silence as the sky darkened. And then this shift happens because like so much of the chapter to that point had actually been very, other than the opening vignette in VR, like very much about the passage of time and like step 1 to step 2 to step 3 and very methodical. And then there's this like drastic acceleration that happens. In an hour, he would be in a windowless truck. In 2 more on a plane. In a day, he'd be somewhere hot, a desert where they tried to compensate by filling the facility with bone-chilling AC. Then he would be in a room with nothing but a bunk, a toilet, and a sink. It would be a week before fear turned to panic, a month before panic turned to despair. Though he didn't know it then, it would be almost a year and a half before he saw a sunset again.
Yeah, I mean, chilling.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a callback too to the structure of narration and time in his very first chapter, which opens the whole novel.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Wow. That like conditional past from the future.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Which, yeah, like Markley so uses the structure of the novel to work like in his favor in this chapter, right? Tony has disappeared. We don't hear from him for a very, very, very long time by function of this coming early in book 4, and book 4 being, I think, the largest by pages book in the novel. And so Tony will, he'll get a book 5 POV. Like, I don't feel bad about spoiling that.
Yeah.
But it's as if like we as a reader are kind of put in the same like vanished, disappeared black box that Tony is put in by the structure and the temporality and the acceleration in that last paragraph.
Yeah, great. Oh man, anything else? I think that about concludes our methods and findings.
I think we should now laugh a bit about
so many good millennial comedy LOLs in this chapter.
Yeah,
I was like,
go back and forth. I got a lot of them.
Okay. Let's see. I really like Tony calling Ash out on his making a joke.
Lovable, very, very dad moment for
465. So Ash's joke is he calls Tony an honorable man. Tony says, I don't know about that. And Ash says, a bit rough on every edge, corner, and surface, as they say.
Amazing.
And then Tony says, that's a joke. And Ash says, an attempt, which is funnier.
That's
than
the funniest part.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. A very like dark humor moment of there's an announcement that there's a mission to Mars that's happening. And the only thing that happens is that people are joking, take us with you.
Yeah.
Which is like both some dark Elon shit, but also extremely hilarious. And this critique of Elon and such. And the escapist fantasies. You can read about more in Sid Simpson, Desiree Weber, and John McMahon towards a critical space theory in the European Journal of Political Theory.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay. I also love how much Tony hates Florida. It just like brings me endless entertainment.
I have the exact same note.
Yeah. His cross to bear that he'd spent so much of his life visiting this place driven to lunacy.
His cross to bear.
By a swamp fever addiction to its own bullshit. Just like, wow, chef's kiss. Incredible.
Every self-satisfied resident convincing themselves that this was the good life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's so good.
I love the way he described how Victor Love won the election, right? Like there's both the materialist explanation of he funneled, she's secretly a bunch of money to Jen Braden. So Braden would suck votes, what she did from Mary Randall. And then there's his other explanation. Victor Love, quote, put a capital D by his name and fooled a third of the stupid fucking country. Everyone wants to suck their thumb and jack off in a VR set. This is what you get.
So good.
Yep.
I really like the Agent Croissant.
It's a great bit.
The shift, like, first she's eating a croissant, right? And she's just the other agent polishing off her croissant and staring at the mess of his car. And then the next time she talks, she becomes Agent Croissant.
Yeah.
And then just remains Agent Croissant basically for the whole chapter, which is very good.
Yeah. And simultaneously, like Tony can't help but make really, really bad, problematic jokes directly to them and also like to himself in the narration. You know, like, quote, I was quote, getting death threats when you two were still breastfeeding.
Yeah, gross.
Tony.
And hilarious.
Yeah.
I really like that in the narration of his affective response to encountering the agents for the first time, he takes a swipe at Dean. So this is on 469. He says, I was on my way to the city. He said he and Dean had once argued about what hackles were before he proved the kid wrong with the internet. Tony's were now at attention.
Tony would be thrilled to use Google to prove himself correct. And you know what? Whomst among us? Yeah,
indeed. I also really liked his description of his frozen pizza in the oven as the standard widower's meal.
Yeah. And I think that's right before he tells Tyrion the cat that you're lucky your species doesn't have to care about this shit.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. Which, you know, I think about all the time as Larry meows at me and comes up on my lap.
Yeah. Yeah. So good.
Yeah, I've got two. It's a really funny but also dark description of Attorney General, also a funny name, Jerome Greenstreet.
Oh, yeah.
Jerome Greenstreet is a hack vizier of Victor Love. He's a Zuritas lackey looking to shred whatever is left of the Constitution. Why would I give a fuck what he thinks? Incredible.
So good.
The really darkest humor, though, is I think when he talks about the creation of the Office of Climate Security, right? Like he talks about how Victor Love A is diverting attention by creating like a reparations commission and having a lot of women in his cabinet, which is a thing that Mark Lee is interested in, I think, consistently. And then the darkest, but slightly funny thing is the proto-fascist or like fascist to be, I forget how Tony calls him, head of the Office of Climate Security, whose tagline is sustainability is lethality.
So good.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yikes. Yeah. Obvious fascist apparatchik.
There we go.
Apparatchik. I can't say that.
Yeah.
Apparatchik. In waiting.
Which would be Tony's go-to, right? Because like he grew up during the Cold War, and like that was the phrase is like Soviet apparatchiks or KGB apparatchiks or whatever. So
yeah, I mean, it is dark that like you can paper over fascism by like just creating a reparations committee.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and like that is specific to the context of the U.S., right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, brutal.
And like, given what Mark Lee has done, you can imagine the online fights in Slapdish, Expeers, and Worldies about how the left should think about, or progressives or Dems should think about the reparations committee vis-a-vis all the terrible shit that's going on.
I do think too, like in addition to flagging, right, the first female Secretary of Defense as like a thing that Tony, right, like this is part of his what gets him canceled is he's like skeptical of something like identity politics, but a non-Kambahi version of it. But also, I think, follows on the conversation we were having in the last Shane chapter about like women participating in violence, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And there's a read of this that isn't like, oh, his first female Secretary of Defense, it's how he gets away with stuff because he's just like kowtowing to the liberal ladies, but also just a like straight up acknowledgement that like women in this, in this administration are also on the death machine path.
They are both like weaponized by love, but also weaponizing by contributing to the death machine.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Shall we propose some titles?
We shall. You can go for it because I don't love mine.
Okay. Mine is The Nation Heating Up on the Neoliberalization of National Security as Oceans Rise and Temps Soar.
That's really good. It took a slightly different attack at the academic journal title, and I also shoehorned in another pop culture reference.
Ooh.
Leviathan, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Instead Be Fucking Terrified of the Security Apparatus.
That's good. I like that one.
Okay, we can use it. We'll go with your summary, and we'll go with my title. How's that sound?
Beautiful. Love that. All
right. Up next, we've got, from real life Matt inspiring Final Fantasy to book Matt and the Years of Rain and Thunder Part 4.
Set in 2034. So we're moving ahead just a wee bit.
Yeah, I will say that is the chapter that my students argued about the most is this upcoming Matt chapter.
That's fascinating.
So I can't wait for us to revisit that together.
I can't wait. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on We Are the Deluge.
And we are the Deluge.